See here. The gears are turning. Here we go. Hopefully I did everything correctly. Looks like I did. Hey guys, everybody in the chat, love you all. We're going to hit record and go. Here we go. Push my buttons.
There you are. Okay, I'll turn my volume off so no echo.
Great. Okay. Oh, 1 second. Still getting an echo. That was my bad.
Come on, Mike.
This is the beauty of live television. Here we go.
Got to teach the youngsters how to use technology these days, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad it's not me behind the wheel.
And we're back. Boom, boom. We're back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and direct from the great state of Jefferson, where freedom still reigns supreme up here on the very wet and marshy Smith River. We've been getting our first deluge of the season. And man, I'm glad I built that rain shelter for my chicken coop a couple days ago. But it's a lovely time. It's actually, it's what do they call that, Bear? It's some sort of pineapple storm. Trying to think of this
atmospheric river. Yeah. Pineapple Express.
Pineapple Express.
Strain. I forget which is which.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's a fun stoner movie.
Not that I had ever gone in that direction.
But it is warm. It's warmer. It's not like a cold winter storm. So we'll take it.
Our pond is officially full now. Our chicken run is a little swampy, so you have to wear your boots out there when you're feeding the chickens. But all's good. The river's rising again. The salmon are running. And I got to go fish my... not for salmon, but get my pumps out of the river before it really gets raging and I lose them. That's where we get our water.
Yes, the joys of living off grid. I wouldn't trade it for anything. No, not that I do, but that's what you would probably say. I have about 50-50 lifestyle, Bears all the way. But yeah, it's good to be here today with Lara J Day. I guess I'm rhyming today. This is going to be a great show. Excited to jump in this today with her, fitting for the holiday season, which is just right around the corner. Lara J. Day, author and teacher, joins this episode to discuss the transformative effects of Neurogenic Qigong. Lara will take our audience through the sacred practice of the 13 holy nights to discover the deeper meaning of the quickly approaching winter solstice. Discover how ancient traditions and modern healing methods come together to help us realign with the season's rhythms. Lara created the 13 Sacred Nights Oracle deck to reveal the deeper meaning behind the winter holidays and provide a guide to turning inward. The ancient winter solstice practice teaches us to align with cosmic cycles and the rhythms of nature in order to discover our own inner light and the true gifts of the season of darkness. Dive into the potent stillness within the womb of winter and plant your dream seeds in the fertile soil of the radiant darkness. Lara's vocation as a movement guide began in 1993 when she began teaching dance and yoga. After discovering the healing of Qigong, it became and continues to be her primary practice. She studied extensively with Damaris Jarboe and Robert Peng and completed the TRE, Tension and Trauma Releasing Exercises certification. Quote, the synergy between Qigong and TRE is nothing short of transformative. The combination allows both the physical and energetic bodies to reset, making way for profound healing, end quote. Join in on this inspiring roundtable as Lara shares her passion to assist others on their path to physical and energetic balance by connecting with self, nature, and the divine. Lando, take it away.
Awesome. So Lara, really looking forward to this. I haven't got to know you too much. We had a very brief chat before here. So I'd really like to hear a little bit of your history and how we got to this place here. This is one of my favorite subject matters, so this is going to be fun for me. And, we're going to be talking about seasonal, what should we call it? Practices. And great, I think it's the timing of this talk is perfect, and I don't know what it's like more in the other parts of the country, but here we're starting to feel real wintry. And as we like to say here, no matter how gloomy and wet it gets and it, gets drawn out up here in the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest, remember the sun is always right above the clouds. And it's good to remember that. It helps you get through some of those gloomy months. And those gloomy months are kind of purposeful, aren't they?
They sure are.
And that's what I hope you're going to, help explain more thoroughly. So why don't we just start with a little bit about your history? And then I really would like to just get into the whole, Qigong and the whole practice that you do there, as well as the winter solstice significance. So let's go there. And
Yeah.
thanks again for making time for us today.
Oh, of course. I'm so happy to be here. And gosh, there's just so many things to talk about. As Mike mentioned, I started with movement practices and interests and hobbies at a very young age. Was a dancer from the time I could walk, and then ended up teaching dance and at age 15, and that morphed very smoothly into yoga practice and yoga teaching, and then from there into Qigong. But I really discovered Qigong when I tripped into chronic illness shortly after my daughter was born. So I have sort of that wounded healer story that so many of us in this realm share. And I went to go see my Qigong teacher as a client because I was just feeling crummy and I couldn't seem to, get out of that with the various practitioners that I had gone to see. And a friend recommended her, and she said, I went to this woman and she told me that I have foreign energy and then she that I needed to be cleared. And I had no idea what foreign energy was, but I felt so crummy. I thought I must have that. Like I need to go see this woman. And so I went to go see her as a client, and she worked with me that just, one session. And I walked out of that session feeling so much better, just physically, tangibly. It was unreal. I felt like I had been breathing underwater and was unaware, and suddenly I could breathe again. And I remember going to the grocery store after that initial session, and it was actually as if I had a different, like, bird's eye view of the cash register, the same grocery store that I always went to, and I thought, God, am I actually physically taller? Like, what happened in there? She hadn't even touched me, or maybe just barely. And so I was so intrigued, and I felt so much better that I jumped that day I committed to jumping into her 4-year medical Qigong training. Interestingly, she is also the woman who and the teacher who taught me this practice of the 13 holy or sacred nights. My new publishers have renamed it the Sacred Nights, and even though her lineage was primarily Qigong, she was wonderfully and divinely feminine in that she was quite inclusive in the way that she practiced and taught. And so she brought in African shamanism and Native American teachings. And this particular practice, she learned and then really made it her own. But the inspiration came from the anthroposophic Rudolf Steiner community.
Oh, neat.
So,
So
that's
what
just,
part of the
yeah.
world does she teach from?
So she's in Boulder, Colorado, where I
Oh,
lived
okay.
for 15 years in the mountains outside of Boulder. And
Great place.
she's a special, very special woman. I feel so incredibly grateful beyond words to be have her as a guide and a mentor and a friend all these years. So yeah.
Nice. So, okay, so Qigong, maybe if you don't mind, we can start there.
Sure.
And, I just want to comment too. I think the best practitioners out there are the ones that have been in their bodies. Dancers, yoga folks, former athletes, we all have something in common in that we use our own body and will force to animate our body through space, and depending on what you did, in very specific ways. And it really goes a long way, to healing your body and everything. But then, now you get into some of the practices that you're going to be talking about. And sometimes we need to be a little more specific. So maybe what is this thing we call Qigong? We have a sophisticated audience, and a lot of people have different ideas, and general ideas, or so what's it mean to you?
Yeah. So Qigong, the word itself literally means, so Qi means universal life force energy,
Hmm.
and Gong means the good work or the practice of. So we have the
Hmm.
good work or practice of cultivating universal life force energy. And that is
Hmm.
the greater umbrella of Qigong. A lot of people think of, if they don't know what Qigong is, and so they say, "What's that?" I say, "Well, have you heard of Tai Chi, or do you know what Tai Chi is?" And then they go, "Oh, yes." And what comes to mind is these very slow movements,
Right.
of this martial art practice, right? So Tai Chi is under the greater umbrella
Hmm.
of Qigong. Now, in China, even something like calligraphy could be a form of Qigong if you are practicing calligraphy as a spiritual art form in order to refine your
Right.
energy. So within, again, that greater umbrella of Qigong, we have the personal practice forms, which look like what most people think of as Tai Chi, right? Moving slowly and mindfully with breath through space in our bodies. There's also internal practices that are seated
Hmm.
where you're not actually moving your body and you're moving energy internally. But that's all within the personal practice realm. And then you also have the clinical side of things, which looks more like, you know, perhaps a rough way of saying it might be an acupuncture session without the needles, where
Hmm.
the practitioner is working with their hands and with energy and consciousness in order to work with the meridian lines and the cauldrons within the energy
Hmm.
body and the five elements and that whole rich system of Chinese medicine.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was first introduced to Qigong. I was practicing martial arts after uh, my athletic career, and it was more the hard styles. I started with Taekwondo, like a lot of people do, and Kempo. And then I, over the years, gravitated more towards the internal arts and to what's loosely called Kung Fu, but it's built on a foundation of three internal practices, which is Bagua, Xing Yi, and Tai Chi. And they each embody, three attributes that are incorporated into Kung Fu. So that's where it was just very valuable to me to not only be able to cultivate and direct that energy, but to use it in a very practical way. So I just like to get that out because what we're talking about today is not a new agey kind of concept. It's in fact, if we talk about chi as like prana, all the different terms for this kind of energy and anthroposophical, there's different names, alchemical, they, had called it the mercury. But really it's a basis of everything. And what I learned in my practice is that it's not just an energy that kind of courses through or animates, which it does, but also all the way into the densest physical tissues of the body. It's chi. It's
Right.
just reached certain still points to reach density to give us the appearance of physicality. Uh, so I would just say that there's really nothing in the world but this chi, and it kind of obeys our every wish and demand. So I think that maybe use that as a segue to how does Qigong use us to direct it rather than just, not even being aware of it, let alone using it to our advantage.
Yeah. For me, to just echo what you're saying, the moment that I really fell in love with Qigong, aside from, feeling so incredible after having my teacher give me a session, but the first time that I engaged in a Qigong practice, in a personal practice, the movement forms, I could suddenly, very physically and in a very real way, feel this tangible energy in between my hands that was
Hmm.
suddenly, just right there that I had previously been completely oblivious to. And that to me was so exciting that, I had, had a yoga practice before that and was already teaching yoga. I'd been teaching for 6 or 7 years before I, engaged in my exploration of Qigong. And in that moment, I was just all in. It was like all qigong
Yeah.
from that moment forward, and my hamstrings are a little worse off for it. But
Yeah.
my awareness of energy and the way that it moves through us and our physical body and our lives and our emotions, and the way it plays out in even the events of our life and everything is just the system is so complete and so rich and also, you know, it was really I want to give credit to the way that my teacher taught us because she did include all of the philosophy and so much history with, you know, with every form that you practice. And, you know, it's just, it's such a deep and wide practice. And so it really, yeah, it's a many lifetime practice, right? You could just keep going deeper with it.
But the great thing
Forever.
is once you get into it, you're really not in a hurry to get anywhere,
That too, you know, that's
and
true. I often
you're
think if
just
I
where
had
you're
just
at.
stuck with the very first practice that I learned,
Hmm.
like the very first one in my 4 year
Hmm.
training, you know, and now I'm 17 years deep in the practice of Qigong. But if I had just stuck with the first one, I think, you know, I'd probably be more spiritually advanced
Hmm.
if I had, you know, you know, hopping around from often we think like, oh, if it's more complex, that's somehow better, right? And
Yeah.
not necessarily so. Yeah. So agree.
Yeah, I think the practices that require more outer explanation and mental terminologies and discussions take you further and further away from just feeling the chi.
Yeah, absolutely. That can be true. Yeah. And I do, I like to practice in a way that, you know, when I approach my practice, it's not from a disciplined, you know, I have to do my Qigong practice. I approach my practice as if it's a hot date with the divine. And so
Hmm.
for me, it's pleasurable to lead into that space to you know to go to like I said go on a hot date with this energy, this mind, this consciousness that's swirling around us and within us always, whether or not we're aware of it. And you know it's like a combination of dancing with, bathing in, massaging myself with and in this again suddenly tangible energy that
Hmm.
that is everywhere and in everything.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about how you practice with other people, how you instruct them with your neurogenic?
Yeah. So the neurogenic piece came in when I learned the neurogenic tremor process with the TRE
Hmm.
organization
Hmm.
in Northern California, and that stands for tension and trauma releasing exercises.
Hmm.
And so a neurogenic tremor is if you think of the way that an animal shakes when it's
Hmm.
scared or overstimulated, much like let's take a gazelle, for example, gets chased by a lion, you know, and then it escapes and finally realizes, okay, I'm not going to be breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It will, you know, wander off to the side of the herd and shake and tremble and then once that process is over, it will wander back to the herd and graze, you know, as if nothing's wrong, no PTSD, perfectly happy, healthy gazelle, right?
Hmm.
So turns out this mechanism is innate in all mammals, and we humans are socially conditioned to shut it down. So
Hmm.
if we were to experience some kind of overwhelming situation and start shaking and trembling, you know, unlike the herd that just you know ignores the shaking and trembling gazelle, probably our friends and family or whoever's there might come over and try to help us make it stop in some way, right? Do we
Hmm.
need to call an ambulance? Do you need whatever, an Ativan, a shot of whiskey, like whatever it is? How can we help you, you know, make this stop? So what I learned was a way to kind of manually stimulate that neurogenic tremor in the body. And it's not a voluntary shaking. It's not, you know, like ecstatic dance or some other thing where you're voluntarily, you know, moving. Even if it's intuitive movement, it's not that. It is an involuntary tremor. So what I do with clients, and I teach workshops as well, but essentially we lie down on a yoga mat and turn that tremor response on. And then once the individual is tremoring, then I interweave the Chinese energy medicine. So I interweave working with the meridians, the five element work with the organs, you know, some of it's healing sounds. Sometimes we work with various words that might stimulate deeper emotions or stories to bubble to the surface. And that tremor, that muscle contraction, that involuntary muscle contraction is actually working to release tension that is held deep within the body and the tissues and the energy body. So
Yeah.
it's quite a it's a different experience that most people have not had, and it really, because we have the physical process of the tremors and then the energetic of the qigong coming together, it can be quite transformative and make way for a lot of blockages to release, a lot of trapped memories to surface, things like that.
The physiological component of tremors that you might get, when you're breaking a fever or after you just had the bejesus scared out of you, either way, it's like you understand, it's a neurological stimulated tremoring of the muscles that then play on the vessels in order to help the vessels discharge accumulated toxins. And after we go through a scare, and most of us are in low grade scare mode most of our life without knowing
Right.
it, there's, as you know, an accumulation of norepinephrine and all those fight or flight hormones, and they can become toxic and detrimental if they're built up. So those tremors actually help get rid of those physical toxins. And I know you're going deeper on another level again, but same thing, with we're breaking a fever. Well, the body's not sick or doesn't have a contagion caused issue. It's just the body's way of cleaning out, and the tremors will help the vessels, discharge all the accumulations, which is why we get colds and flus in the first place. So it's a real physiological basis. So how do you provoke that in one of your sessions to have people spontaneously
Yeah,
start doing that?
it's easier than you might think, and I
Mm-hmm.
do work quite differently. I first experienced the tremors with a healer uh, that just um, in Northern California. And then I went ahead and studied with the TRE organization. And the way that
Mm-hmm.
I um, evoke the tremors in with my clients and in workshops is quite different than the way that the TRE organization works. So,
Mm-hmm.
I've taken it and made it my own. But it's much easier than you would guess. And actually, we just hold our lower body in some kind of awkward positions and
Ah,
that
okay.
are a little bit vulnerable in a way, just muscularly.
Mm-hmm.
And the inner thighs begin to tremble. And then I have little tricks that help me encourage that tremor to
Mm-hmm.
move throughout the entire body so that we're kind of breaking up, the body that was maybe
Yeah.
once a glacier and
Yeah.
allowing it to be more fluid and connected. And yeah.
So when they go into the state, then I imagine you're kind of coaching them through a process of some sort uh, to help them get in touch with certain things or release certain things. So
Yeah.
and I know it gets more involved and it's a lot of play it by ear with, good practices, but can you give us just kind of a general idea of how that might, how you might lead people into what they need to release?
Yeah, so that's where the qigong really comes into
Ah,
play for me, is that I'm working
makes
with the
sense.
five
Yeah.
element system, and when I work with an individual client, it's quite different when I give a workshop, obviously, because I'm working with 20, 30, 50 individuals, so it's got to stay pretty generic. But when
Mm-hmm.
I work with an individual, we talk before we lay down on the mat, and I hear quite a bit of their story, and then I'm doing a read on the energy body and feeling into, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and the different
Mm-hmm.
meridians and organs that correlate. And there are, of course, if you know the five element system, there are, emotional themes that
Mm-hmm.
correspond to each of the elements. And so when I start to get a full picture of the individual that I'm working with, then we might choose a qigong healing sound to stimulate,
Mm-hmm.
to help stimulate some of that story. And often I use words. So for
Mm-hmm.
instance, uh, some of them I repeat often. Sometimes there'll be a new word that drops in. When I'm with a client, I'm really, you know, just attempting to tap into what's present and what's there and listening and receiving and feeling the energy. And so sometimes a word will just drop in out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll know that that word is meant for that individual. But one that comes up quite frequently is the word enough, for instance. And so I will have the client Repeat that word, you know, 3 times, 30 times, 300 times, as many times as they would like. Whisper it, sing it, scream it. You can say it, just mumble it, however it wants to come out. And that word in particular, enough, often is very stimulating, especially for somebody who has a metal theme going on in their life and body and story. Because metal is often presents as low confidence, father issues, feeling like we're not enough, we're never enough, these sorts of things, low self-worth. And so that word, however, enough, can mean a million different things to any given individual, right? And so they're tremoring, they're on the mat. Perhaps I'm working with an organ or a meridian point, and then they're reciting the word enough, and that will trigger for them thematically, most likely, some kind of deep subconscious belief or a memory that triggered this subconscious belief of feeling like they're not enough, or maybe it's enough. That's enough. Maybe it's a boundary thing, So again, there are many different ways that word can be interpreted. So that's one way that I help those themes
Yeah,
and
no,
memories
brilliant.
and beliefs
Sounds wonderful.
surface. Yeah. And what's interesting with the tremoring is that when there is uh, something that's bubbling to the surface or being released, or some long held blockage that's breaking up, it's wild because you'll see the tremors then flurry through the body or get excited or really, express in a much louder way or more obvious way. And then often there's tears and a whole emotional release that comes along with it. But you'll see the physical in tandem with the emotional, right, releasing simultaneously. So, yeah.
It's interesting, Laura. Like we state a lot on this channel and just all the circles of terrain medicine that foundationally illness, disease comes from, the mental plane, the emotional plane. It comes from the non-material, and then it is, of course, the beautiful machine of our body takes that and it helps our spirit by either taking those the traumas and stuff and placing them in the tissue away so that we can partition those right and so that we can survive here. So it seems like what you're doing is you're sort of rewinding that, right? You're reverse engineering that by working with the body then to release that sort of binded up, that bounded trauma, then to reawaken our subconscious and our conscious to that, so that we can then admit that through the word or through emotions or whatnot, so that we can heal. Is that
Yeah.
basically what's happening there, right?
Absolutely. And I often will use the metaphor of a giant bungled up, like knotted up ball of yarn, because when my daughter was about 5 years old, she got really into knitting and she would bring these balls of twisted up yarn to me that she had been attempting to untangle on her own. And what happens when you yank at like the wrong part of a knot, right? It just tightens down.
Sounds like my fishing experiences with my boys.
Exactly. So I often use that metaphor as, when we sometimes intellectually approach our illnesses, or our wounds or our injuries, we often end up like yanking on the wrong part of the knot, right? And just like
Oh,
banging
yeah.
our head against the wall of intellectual, healing. And so what I love about the combination of the qigong and the tremoring is the tremoring is so body based, and you are not, again, this is not choreographed movement. You're not going, I have this shoulder injury, so I'm going to move my shoulder. It's coming from the brainstem. It's coming from the subconscious, and the body knows how that tangled pattern came in. And so the body knows better than our conscious mind does where the end of the knot is, and through the tremor it begins to unwind that. So it's just brilliant that we don't have to figure it out. I mean, as somebody who went through many years um, of chronic unwellness, like the worst part of it was the head fuck. It's just the
Yeah.
constant. Sorry, I don't know if it's PC here, but
We're
to
very
to
PC.
to swear, but I'll clean it up. But
I'll
that
take that
just
out on the edit.
Okay, just constantly, just trying to figure out from an intellectual place what's wrong here and how to fix it is exhausting. And nine
And
times out of 10, I think makes it worse, you
And the
know?
worst people at doing that are doctors. I used to teach some seminars back in the old days, and I use that exact metaphor because we developed some techniques, which I won't go into, but it allowed the body to direct the unraveling. And I use that ball of yarn analogy of as doctors, because we've got all this brainy stuff going on, and you can even get pretty good at acknowledging that, oh, there's a problem over there, whether it's in the meridian system or orthopedically, whatever. And we start tugging on the wrong thing at the right time, on the wrong time. And,
Right.
it's legit what they're seeing. I used to do the same thing. But you have to have a way for the body to, lead you sequentially to pull on the right thing at the right time. Otherwise, you make things worse.
Right.
And in the body, in its brilliance, what it does is when you start going down the wrong path prematurely, it builds up defenses
Mm,
that make it a little bit more difficult down the road to really get at what's ailing a person.
yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think that's potentially what Parkinson's is and these other shaking, supposedly neurological degenerative diseases? Of course, they'll relate it to whether it's genetics or some sort of, like I said, degenerative neurological condition. But there are people that get Parkinson's very early in life. That's there's kind of unexplainable. So yeah, just curious. I just watched a movie about a gal with Parkinson's, a comedy called, it's interesting, Love and Other Drugs. I don't know if you've seen it with
Mm-mm.
Jake Gyllenhaal. Anyways, it's a total like deep dive into allopathy too. But yeah, she's the main character has Parkinson's and she's like in her 20s. So yeah, I've always just been curious about that. Like, is that, could that
You
be an
know,
expression from something deep seated subconscious that the body is just tremoring because you're not releasing that trauma?
I Just a real quick comment. The genesis of Parkinson's as a neurodegenerative disorder comes from deeper places that uh, Lara is familiar with. But then once you're in that kind of vicious circle of a degenerating amygdala that, puts out dopamine, and now you have a dopamine imbalance, and, that's what's creating the physiology that we describe as, Parkinson's symptoms. So, yeah, so I think I would answer that a little bit of both. It's coming from a deeper level, but then physiology is kind of real, but then, you can't just approach it on that level to fix things either.
yeah,
Anyway,
I would
sorry,
agree with that.
what would
No,
you
that's
say? Yeah.
okay. I'm glad you
Mhm.
jumped in there. Because, it's not quite the same as this neurogenic tremor. There's,
Mhm.
like you're saying, Bear, there's a chemical
Mhm.
deficiency and thing happening there. It certainly is a body's coping mechanism
Mhm.
for sure. And I also agree that all illness on some level, more and more, I believe, is coming from some deeper. It's all coming from the spiritual, right? Consciousness
Mhm.
and mind are underlying everything.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if I really answered the question there, but yeah,
Yeah, and I was just trying to get to cause. I know that there's a physiological expression that's happening from a, biochemical process, but also, I touch into reincarnation, and that for me explains so much previous life stuff, cause and effect, destiny, mental, emotional, psychic destiny that forms in some sort of physiological expression. So you could be 20 years old and have that Parkinson's
mm,
due to literally previous lives. And I know that gets super woo for a lot of people, but for me, that's an established fact that reincarnation's real.
yeah,
That seems like the Quakers maybe and some of these evangelical Christians kind of understood the effect, the profound effects of the shaking and the tremoring, right?
right, yeah. Oh, every culture, right? I mean, all the ancient cultures, all the native, more indigenous cultures, a lot of them have shaking practices because it is so beneficial to allow the body to release in that way.
Yeah, especially in dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
African tribal dance, Native
Yep.
American circle, how they dance around the fire and stuff. It's always kind of a shaking dance.
Right.
That makes sense. Maybe why I loved roller coasters so much as a kid. Um, yeah,
Kind of like
so
one of your DJ sessions, Mike.
exactly, right? So maybe twerking is not a Kelly
It's
Brogan,
maybe
shout
it's
out to
not
you
so
and all
bad.
your twerking.
Yeah. It's healing. It is healing.
Um, Yeah, so really, I find this so interesting because we love relating the somatics to the emotional and spiritual and how important that is because as Don Lester in the chat, shout out to Don. I think you met Don at
I roomed
Confluence.
with Dawn. I was her tent buddy.
That's what
Yeah.
I thought. You guys are
Yeah.
homies.
We're homies. Yeah.
Um, she says so many people are trying to escape their body, this day
Yeah.
and age, whether that be sort of the kind of luciferic, you could say, because you touched on Steiner in the beginning, new
Mm-hmm.
age, right? That seems so predominant in the spiritual circles right now, or it's sort of like the transhumanist, I'm going to put my consciousness into a machine, into a
Right.
robot,
Right.
right? You've got that's the more like Ahrimanic path.
Yep.
So yet the middle line here is what you're really encompassing, right? Which is the full embodiment of our body in relation to our spirit, our the mental and the emotional and all that. So I think it's a really foundational practice, and I'd love to do this. Do you offer, so you have workshops that you offered and you help others just in your area? Or you go into more events or?
Yeah, so I work with clients one-on-one. I will do Zoom sessions. I personally in my life of just trying to get off the screen more and more and back into in the flesh interactions with real humans. And
Yeah.
so I'll give a really big discount for anyone who's willing to show up on the Central Coast and come to me. And people can come and do 3 to 5 days in a row of intensive sessions, which is a really massive and transformative experience. So there's that, and then I am doing more events. I taught at Confluence last year, and I'll be at Confluence again this year doing a bigger workshop. Hopefully, we'll move up into the brewery and not the yurt because it was not big enough, and there were way more
Yeah.
people that wanted in than there was space for. So right now, those are the only two ways to work with me in the Neurogenic Qigong. I also offer seasonal courses, and those are minus the neurogenic piece. So those are really Qigong courses that also, focus on the gifts of each particular season and like that. And those are,
So,
yeah.
can you take us through the winter solstice
Yeah. Should
portion
we
here?
dive?
Yeah, so
That can be the
are
segue
you
into.
going to make available, or have you already for the other three seasons, or are you?
Yeah, so that's actually how
Mhm.
this all came to be was I started, I mean, the Qigong, the neurogenic Qigong was a completely separate thing for me. And then this winter solstice practice that I created the Oracle deck around was just like a side project. And
Mhm.
I really, it sort of snowballed because I personally just fell in love with the practice and was sharing it with friends and they wanted more and more and
Mhm.
more. And then, here I am now all these years later, and it's my mission to return the soul to the solstice and the holy to our holidays. And
Neat.
it's led me down all these rabbit holes of the history of our holidays and everything else. But along the way, people would inevitably say, "Well, what do you do for the summer solstice? And what do you do for the equinoxes?" And I
Right.
thought, it occurred to me, well, hold on, they're talking about wood, fire, earth, metal, water. And so I merged sort of the seasonal wisdom with the Chinese philosophy system of the five elements, and I have five seasonal courses that teach again. They bring up the gifts of each season, but also from a qigong perspective of working with the five elements. And there's qigong practices that go along with each one and different themes for each season. And those are pre-recorded that you can just buy and do on your own time, from my website. So the only
Oh,
course that I teach that has a live element is the 13 Sacred Nights guided experience, which this year for the first time, and maybe the last, I'm not sure, but this year I'm offering it as a year-long guided experience. So that will
Oh,
make more sense when I talk about what the practice is.
It's
I
interesting
yeah.
you mentioned, sorry, Bear, just this idea of 5 seasons relating to the 5 Chinese elements. What would the fifth season be?
The fifth season is the season of Earth. So we have wood is spring, fire is summer. Uh, Earth has its own special little season that is harvest time or Indian summer or late summer. And then metal is fall and winter is water.
Yeah, that's peculiar to the Chinese system where they took
Yes.
the original four elements and I think, very brilliantly observed that autumn and fall are, two separate things going on. And then, of course, then you can incorporate, the different organ systems that are associated with the two divisions. But I'd love it if you could take us through your cards and your
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, so this practice, the 13 holy or the 13 sacred nights, is really about tuning into the rhythm of the seasons and specifically the winter solstice season. So in the peak of winter, right, if we pay attention to what nature is doing all around us, the trees have dropped their leaves, animals are slowing down or hibernating, grasses and plants and seeds have receded deep into the earth. Everything is sort of drawing energy inward, conserving energy. It's the darkest time of the year, the least amount of light. And, here we are, the humans in the Northern Hemisphere, at least shopping compulsively, overindulging in sugar and alcohol, which is taxing the body as opposed to conserving energy, jam packing our calendars. It is likely the busiest time of year for most folks. We're flooding our lawns with LED lights, which is just like a slap in the face to the darkness. Like, no, we will not go into the darkness. We will not quiet down. We will not be still, And so this practice is really an opportunity to align with the true magic of the winter solstice season, the peak of darkness. And the true magic, I believe, is the radiant darkness. It is the that field of infinite possibility. It's the womb of winter. It's if you think about uh, lighting a match on a bright sunny day, that's sort of underwhelming. But if you light a match in the darkness, suddenly the light is very available, and you can really see it and experience it and recognize it. So when we are surrounded by this blanket of darkness, we are supported by the elements in diving inward and discovering our own internal divine spark, the light within, right? And as above, so below, as without, so within, as the light is returning on the horizon. So let me back up. We have the winter solstice, and the word solstice literally means sun, sol, sistere, to stand still, or sun standing still. So the winter solstice occurs on or around December 21st in the Northern Hemisphere. And then after that, it's the longest, darkest night, the shortest day, the least amount of light in the solar cycle. The sun appears to stand still or pause on the horizon for 3 days. And so back in the day of ancient cultures that were much more in tune with nature and the rhythm of the seasons and the movement of the sun and the stars and the patterns of the cosmos, this was a very shadowy, uncertain time where they were wondering if the sun was going to come back and bring with it its life-giving warmth, right? And so the veil was said to be at its thinnest, and it was a very powerful time. So on that third day after the solstice, the sun begins to move again on the horizon, and the light begins to incrementally increase. And we have this opportunity to, I think of it as catching the tip of the fractal of the light
Hmm.
that's going to
Hmm.
continue to unfold throughout the remainder of the year. And the practice itself has this very delightful structure. It's 13 days long, which is a tip of the hat to the goddess, right? 13
Hmm.
moon cycles in the year, 13 female fertility cycles. It's not an unlucky number. That was a campaign to erase and destroy all goddess worshiping systems by the Roman Catholic Church. So it's 13 days
Shocking.
long. And in an ancient world, this practice likely would have been done with the 13 moon cycles. But the way that I practice, the way my teacher taught me, it's been reinvented in order to make it simple and accessible to those of us living in the modern world.
Hmm.
So each day during the 13 sacred nights corresponds to a month in the coming year, with the exception of the first night, which is a foreshadowing or a reflection of the entire year to come. So during these 13 days, we're doing two things. And the first thing we're doing is receiving. We're capturing that, like I talked about, that tip of the fractal. We're capturing the first light, the first guidance, the first foreshadowing as it's streaming back in. Well, how do you do that? Simply by paying attention, getting present, being mindful, recording everything in a journal, like all the happenings in your outer world, just what's going on. I went to the grocery store and had a conversation with the checker. I saw this sign on the freeway that made an impression on me. This song came on the radio, so and so called me. Just the details of your day. They might seem mundane. Later in the year, they're going to be precious guidance. And then also you're drawing oracle cards from the deck, and so you're
neat.
drawing cards for each night, which will again later serve to guide you. So that's the receive bit. And then the second piece is you're planting your dream seeds. It's co-creation. So planting your dream seeds in the womb of winter, in the fertile soil of the darkness, so that they'll sprout in the spring, bloom into their full expansion in the summertime. You are living the dream that you planted back in the peak of winter in the darkness. And then in the fall, there's this richness. We're harvesting the fruits of our labor. We're taking a glance back at, what do we want to keep for the next cycle? What do we want to throw on the compost pile before diving back in for another cycle of seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall. So we are beginning to pay attention to this rhythm and this flow of energies throughout the year. And it really is co-creation amplified by aligning with nature, aligning with the rhythm of the seasons.
So with the 13 days, do they start like day one with like sequentially following how I don't want to say months because we're talking about lunar cycles, how they unfold through the seasons?
Yeah. So again, like it probably would have originally been done with a lunar cycle, or again, this was inspired by all these ancient cultures and this ancient wisdom. But it's a modern recreation of something that's similar that may have existed back then. And so we do it with the solar calendar, and the first night falls at sundown on December 24th. And carries through until sundown on December 25th. So that first 24-hour cycle is what I'm calling the first sacred night. And that first 24-hour cycle, even though I'm saying night, the whole 24 hours is an imprint of the entire cycle to come. The second sacred night begins at sundown the 25th and carries through until sundown the 26th. That's January. Sundown the 26th to sundown the 27th. That's February, and so on. So it's all in the book. There's instructions on how to do it all in a chart on the days and the months they correspond to. But essentially, again, we're creating this roadmap or this blueprint. And the beauty of the practice is that then you have this personally made journal that you created hand in hand with your guide, spirit, source, God, the angels, the mystery, the quantum field, whoever or whatever that something greater is to you. And as your year unfolds, the synchronicities that tumble out of this personally made journal are just laugh out loud, goosebump inducing. They'll make you cry, like give you, just more perspective than your most insightful therapist, your like best friend that's known you your whole life, a crystal ball, like the best astrology reading money can buy. It's just ridiculous how what you curated during that winter window in the womb of winter, how it then lines up with the actual events of your life later in the year.
Yeah, I was going to say not law of attraction, law of curation, or law of creation here.
Co-creation, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's more of a specific date that you start these 13 days on?
Yeah, so you begin, the practice itself begins on the solstice, and you have
on
those
the solstice
first,
itself, not leading up to the solstice. Okay.
Right, on the solstice, which is the 21st, and you have those first 3 days where the sun is pausing for us.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'm going to let you take a moment here to get your ducks in a row while I'm waiting for you. I'm pausing, And so you have those first 3 days to think about, okay, what do I want to bring to this window? What do I, okay, oh, I want to do more cooking. Okay, I'm going to get some cookbooks and some recipes together, just so that you're doing a little bit less of that busy work during the actual 13 days themselves. If you want to, do more cycling, you're, fixing the chain on your bicycle, I don't know, whatever it is. You're just sort of getting ready, maybe gathering phone numbers of people that you intend to reach out to because you want to have them in your life for the coming cycle. So you want to get them into your imprint somehow, right? And you really are, you're creating a blueprint that it's this real physical and energetic imprint that just gets swept right into your future in a way that is super magical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. So how many oracle cards are there?
There are 52 oracle cards, and they
Oh,
are
interesting.
divided
Uh-huh.
up into animals, herbs, and crystals.
Oh,
So on the
interesting.
first sacred night, we draw one animal card, one herb card, and one crystal card. And
Mm-hmm.
those are sort of your overarching guides or themes for
Mm-hmm.
the entire cycle, the coming cycle. And then each of the following 12 nights, you shuffle the whole deck together. You're not
Mm-hmm.
leaving cards out each night. You shuffle it back together and draw one oracle card. And it's important to use the whole deck every night because often you'll draw the same card despite the mathematical odds, numerous times during one, 13 sacred night season, which of course makes perfect sense because we often go through uh, seasons of our life or themes in our
Mm-hmm.
life that last longer than 30 or 31 days,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's very
So
common.
each of the categories obviously has a lot of different insights correlated with each card. Um, and also in the long run, let's just say you find the preponderance of your cards were from one category, like mineral versus, and I imagine that would have some kind of significance as well.
Yeah, nobody's ever brought that up, but sure. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it, but
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, if the animals are heavy with you one year, I don't know, leaning into animal wisdom versus herbal wisdom, maybe it's time to start experimenting with herbal medicine and
Yeah,
supporting your body
yeah,
with
yeah.
whole
You just
plant
got my
medicine.
wheels turning, so I'm just
Yeah. Yeah, or
thinking out loud.
exploring, the
Hmm.
different healing properties of crystals. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, way cool.
Yeah, and I that when I was working on this Oracle deck and still really wondering if I was going to actually bring it out into the world, because truth be told, I wasn't really a tarot card lady or an Oracle deck
Hmm.
person before learning this practice. And this practice, I mean, that was the first time I bought an Oracle deck was when I learned this practice and was like, oh, this is kind of this is a more meaningful thing to bring into our holiday season. So sick of the kind of performative cheer and the shopping and the sugar and the alcohol and the tinsel and the tangled strands of lights and all the things, and looking for something more meaningful and deeper. And so fast forward, and I've been convinced to put something together for my friends so that they can also do the practice. And I'm creating this oracle deck. And I went to a friend's house who I've known since we were babies, and a good friend of mine, and he's very straight-laced. He's an ER doctor, not super hippie trippy guy. And
Hmm.
I was telling him and his wife about the practice, and they have three daughters, and he was really curious. And like even more than his wife. He was like, "Oh, we should do this with the girls. Like, I'm so sick of all
That's
the
great.
presents, and this would just really be cool because then we could introduce something other than just consumerism." And he was asking me all these questions, and that was when I really knew, like, okay, if my buddy here is curious about this then the world is really ready for something, other than the Christmas mayhem that we're kind of all sick of, and yet we don't really. A lot of folks kind of don't want to go back to maybe their religious roots, which perhaps traumatized them, growing up, and yet we intuitively know there's something special about this time, but how do we celebrate it? How do we mark it? And this practice really gives folks an easy in. You can make it your own. You could crawl into a cave for 13 days and be, super profound and deep and meditative, or you could just kind of delightfully play with it on the side. You don't have to, it's not either or. You don't have to completely jump ship from all your current holiday traditions. My daughter still loves the Christmas tree. And, even though I could do without setting it up every year, she loves our ornament collection. A lot of it was passed down from my grandmother, and so if you have practices that you love and that are nourishing for you, by all means continue. But I think folks will find, as I did, that over the years, this practice sort of has shifted into center stage, and all that other fuss is kind of on the back burner or in the background.
Yeah.
And so for us now, as the seasons start to shift, and we notice that it's, we're heading in towards darkness, and it's getting cooler out, we start thinking, oh, the sacred nights are coming. And it's, oh, mom, we have to go get our sacred nights journals, and what do I want to bring to the new cycle? And how has this, you start getting more introspective, and we get
I love
excited
it.
about this. And so it's just a beautiful, delightful, sneaky way to begin to shift your attention or your family's attention towards aligning with nature, towards something more meaningful other than just the materialism and the consumerism. And on a side note, I do think it's so important how we approach our holidays and our rituals, because not only culturally, and this is the reason that they've been used throughout the ages to shift and mold the behavior of the masses, that we have these moments where the whole society is choosing to pause and direct our attention in a particular way, right? And all of us collectively are going, now we're going to focus on this thing, and this is a ritual, and it's it's our holiday. And not only is that powerful in and of itself, because I personally believe that human consciousness is divinely creative, so we're all pausing and looking in the same direction, but also we are teaching the younger generations, look, this is what's most sacred. This is what's most important about being human in this culture and in this society. And right now, we're teaching our younger generations that, again, shopping, sugar, and alcohol are most important, right? And so I think we have this opportunity to pause with these communities that are um, digging into the deeper questions and what's really going on and what is our true history. We have this opportunity to pause and consciously choose how we want to mark these turning points in the year, these sacred moments.
Yeah. In my childhood, things were a lot different. And even though it was, I grew up in a culture that's very Latin Catholic, um, and even, all the Vatican shenanigans aside, there was an emphasis more on the spiritual. And it did, with, like you say, that collective focus, a real palpable resonance that was otherworldly, that, we all tuned in on. There was magic, when you're
Midnight
stalking
mass,
and
Bear. Midnight
what's that?
mass. Said midnight mass.
Oh boy. We used to go to morning mass. We never did the midnight one.
Well, that I only bring that up because that's a sync, right? That's with the nights, the holy nights, right?
Oh,
Like
right.
and yeah, I always tripped out. I'm like, why are we didn't go to the midnight one. We went, they cheated a bit. It was 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then we would have this tradition where after that we would go home and we would come together around the tree and open one present, before Santa was
Yeah. We'd have each person, as a kid, we get one big present, which would seem pretty insignificant compared to, iPhones and things today. And your stocking was full of like walnuts and tangerines. Kids these days would go, "What the F is this stuff?" And
Where's the iPad?
so it was less materialistic. Just a word for our audience, anybody that has never used oracle cards, they're amazingly uncanny.
Mm.
Now, we've used them for years, everything from runes to angel cards to animal cards. My favorite so far have always been the animal cards. And, you're not using them in a deterministic sense of, oh, this is, something's going to happen because of this or whatever. No, you're just allowing spirit to kind of come through and give little messages. And, an example of the animal cards, which are really cool, more than Native American cards. And they also have animal cards from the Druid tradition. We do both, and you get a little bit of a different, vibe from each one of them. For people that don't live in nature, we're walking around here every day and just having something's always jumping in front of you or running up the tree or, on your deck at night. And we just go, okay, heavy bear medicine today. So we kind of go look up, refresh our memory of, what the message when bear comes into your life. And of course, more the indigenous cultures knew that wasn't random, and
Right.
nothing's random. And there's a certain energy that came into your life that you're supposed to pay attention to. So the animal cards, just as an example, can be a great way to sort of, even if you're an urban gentleman, you can kind of tune in a different way and see what kind of energy you should be paying attention to. So I'm looking forward to getting your deck and even going through the whole process from the solstice. That sounds like a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
it sounds like it'd be very productive as well.
It
So
is.
thank you
And I
for all
love
that.
that you said that it's not deterministic because I have had numerous people call me over the years and say, oh
Hmm.
my goodness, this horrible thing happened during the holy nights or the sacred nights. Does that mean that my whole month of October is going to be awful? Or does that mean that my whole year is going to be a disaster? And my advice is always to not strangle the mystery
Hmm.
and to
Right.
remember that what is offered during this window is always meant to be helpful, always, no matter what it is. And so it doesn't mean, oh, this thing happened, so something bad is going to happen, because very often, maybe you went through some shenanigan during the sacred night window itself, but you gained some wisdom from that, or there was something that was offered that's later just going to help you navigate something else with more grace and ease.
Hmm.
And then sometimes it's very metaphoric the way it lines up, and it might
Hmm.
even align with some fabulous event later. But
Right.
there's some laugh out loud way that the universe made it make sense that you could never have dreamt up on your own. So don't strangle the mystery. We don't know
Yeah.
how it's going to unfold, and this is always meant to be helpful. It's never meant to be a curse or anything like that. And that said, I was very aware of the nocebo effect when I
Hmm.
created the Oracle deck, and
Hmm.
I really very intentionally did not want to curse anyone. So
Yeah.
all of the cards have a very positive spin, or even if it's a card talking about some human challenge that we all can relate to, it's always from the angle of here's the gift within that, here's the healing opportunity, here's the insight gained from walking through this. So
Do
yeah.
you, by any chance, have any cards handy where you could do some show and tell?
I do. Yeah, I've got my so this is the new edition. So for those of you listening who have the original OG self-published version, which is going to be a collector's item someday, um, this new edition has a new history of the winter solstice section. It's got a meditation to go along with each of the 52 cards. I'll just hold up a few. This is Lapis. It's got a frequently asked questions section, which there's Rose, one of my favorites.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, rattlesnake. The wisdom of rattlesnake comes from a very personal experience of getting bit by a rattlesnake when I was 24 years old.
Oh, wow.
Ouch.
So that's some hard won wisdom in there. Oh, this is I think perhaps my favorite illustration, Bumblebee.
And who
Pe-
did these illustrations
Peacock.
again, Laura?
So I can give the majority of the credit to my friend Jenny Brennan.
Those
Of
are wonderful illustrations.
Yeah, and yet it was very collaborative. I surfed Adobe stock for some of the images, and was can you move this that way or that this way or put this animal, or we really collaborated. But the majority of this artwork is really her brainchild, and she's wonderfully creative, and
So
so
you have the
yeah.
minerals, you have the herbs, you have the animals, and then you have something. Let's see, what else? I'm looking at it right now too. Is there something I'm missing?
Nope, there's three. In fact,
Yeah.
when I started, I was going to make, just like a 52 card deck. I was going to make four categories, but I fell so in love with creating the animal writings, because animals they're like a little archetype of, or a little slice of some human characteristic. They're so delightfully human in many ways. And so I just got addicted to writing about the animals, and I thought, no, I'm going to double it. I'm going to do 26 animals,
Neat.
and then
Well, there is this notion that, each human embodiment has an animal double or a daimon that is a representative of their incarnated true, like, sort of life path and spirit. And even like some people will physically look like that animal a bit.
yeah, yeah.
What
Um,
was the movie
Somebody
I kind
once
of
told me that
liked?
if I were an animal, I'd be a bush baby. I don't know what that means.
I loved the yeah.
Golden Compass Bear.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
That's a
that was
book.
great.
Yeah.
With the what they call them, everybody had their daemon,
The
and
right, right.
daemon, yeah, which
Yeah,
goes back to sort of Greek,
Mhm.
Greek mythology,
yeah.
and of course the idea of the oracle was very, very present in Greek society. You literally went to the oracles, all the world leaders, to get their divine wisdom. So they were very tapped into how this all worked. And
Yeah.
you know, obviously, and honestly, I was thinking Christmas is traditionally known in this side of the world as a quote unquote Christian holiday. And I'm sure many sort of more conventional Christians will look at this as occulted magic, that this is dangerous, this will bring in spirits and ghosts. And ironically enough, what we always talk about here is like the Christian actual holiday is very pagan. I mean, literally, Jesus being born on the 25th is the sun. SON is relation to the sun, SUN rising out of the winter solstice, as you were saying, from the 22nd, 23rd, 24th. It's in stasis. And then it rises again on the 25th, which is the Son of God rising up, and then you have all sorts of other elements around the Christmas tradition within the Mass that is basically paganism, which goes back
Mhm.
to Mithraism, goes back to all sorts of ancient other religions. So, for those that are, I'm just bringing this up for those that are maybe triggered a bit about this from their Christian roots. I think it's good to understand that this isn't some sort of deep occulted dark magic stuff. This is quite the opposite. This is how reality works, and this is just a tool to allow our consciousness to properly, as you said, grow our garden for the year, right?
Yeah. And in
And
fact, to go down that rabbit hole of the history of Christmas, Christmas was actually outlawed from 1659 to 1681 in the early days of the colonies because it looked nothing like what we think of as Christmas today. Nothing at all. It was much more reminiscent of Saturnalia
yeah.
in
Yep.
ancient Rome and
Mhm.
this time of upheaval and complete societal upside downness. And, there was role reversal and gambling and debauchery, and, children ruled the
Yeah.
household, and a fool was crowned king, and slaves were served by their slave owners. And there was this society-wide release valve that happened,
Not
and
gonna lie, that sounds kind of fun.
yeah, and everyone was in on it, right? And then you fast forward to the colonies, and the Puritans were just not having it because they understood that aligning the birth of Jesus with the winter solstice was actually, a pagan veneer, or
Yeah.
excuse me, a Christian veneer over paganism. And so there's a whole history there, and I dove really deep into that when I added the history section to the Oracle deck for the new edition. And then,
Oh,
That
nice.
was yeah, that was my next thing I wanted to get
yeah,
into. Just a quick comment for people that are triggered by magic and such notions. Just say 10 Hail Marys, three Our Fathers, and an act of contrition. Dominus Nobiscus. Or as an altar boy, we used to fudge the Latin word and say Dominus Nobisco, Hail Mary, full of grapes. Stuff like that. So anyway, can you give us a little bit of insight into the other holidays?
Well, can I
Valentine's
just
Day,
touch on
Thanksgiving.
Christmas?
Go ahead.
One more
You
yeah,
thing
have
yeah,
about
some Catholic
Christmas.
stories. Mike and I are both recovering Catholics here.
yeah, yeah.
No, just to shout out to Dickens, the goat, 19th century author. I mean, it was really a Christmas carol that brought the Christmas into the modern mindset. It wasn't even a very popular holiday, from what I understand. The Christmas tree was brought over from Germany. It wasn't even really a thing. Like, he was one of the first to actually have a Christmas tree in his house. And it was really that book, A Christmas Carol, that sort of, which is funny, it's a ghost story, which brought the idea of celebrating Christmas really to the forefront of not only commercialism, which really developed in the 20th century, but even just as something that's more of a present. From this is what I understand. I don't know, Laura, you can fill this in. That was actually a more of a present holiday. It was like a very minor holiday, from what I
Yeah,
understand.
there was a lot of tension around it from the beginning, and you're right that that play, A Christmas Carol, did play a big part in shifting the culture. And it's interesting to notice, for us in the modern world, the storyline is that there was this Scrooge who would not celebrate Christmas, right? And the Dickens, the author, was trying to engage in this very current conversation about should we celebrate Christmas or should we not, which again goes back to the Puritans and the
Yep.
more pagan cultures that are bubbling up through the surface, reminiscent of Saturnalia. And so that poor family that cannot afford to celebrate Christmas, that he ends up, supplying was it a
The
turkey or a chicken,
Crockett's.
a goose? I don't remember. Yeah, for the Crockett's. It was a commentary on that political unfolding that was happening at the time. And so it wouldn't have been for us like the idea of a Scrooge who doesn't want to celebrate Christmas is really extreme. But back when that play was written, it was quite normal that there were many people who just chose not to celebrate Christmas and believed that was the right thing to do. And so Dickens was, trying to grease the wheels to bring Christmas back, right? Since it had been outlawed in the 1600s and whatnot. But it goes beyond that, really. That again, we have the Puritans who are just not having Christmas. It's a pagan holiday. We don't want to celebrate it. Easter is the more important one for them. And then what also was happening in the colonies was this rift between the working classes and the elites. And again, remember, in the old world, the whole society was in on, letting some steam out of the kettle during these 2 weeks of the Christmas season. And they all participated willingly, knowing that kind of the social order would go back to normal after it was over. And in fact, if you played along with these shenanigans, you would ensure that, the classes would all stay in their rightful places for the rest of the year, and you'd get good service from your slaves and everything else, right? And so what happened in the colonies was the elites started to pull away from these traditions. And when they would have rowdy bands of drunken youths showing up at their, wealthy manor door, demanding cider or whatever alcohol they had in the cellar or sweets, think about some of our Christmas carols, you know, oh, give us some figgy pudding. Oh, give us some figgy pudding. Like, we won't go
Yeah.
until we get some. We won't go until we
Yeah.
get some. It was this exchange that happened between the working classes and the elites. And the agreement, the previous agreement, was if we come and we sing our songs for you, wassailing, right? Oh, here we go, a wassailing. Or we put on these plays for you, these masked plays, which they called mumming, then you're going to give us something in exchange. And the elite started to close their doors and say, no, we're not participating. And so that very quickly escalated into violence and, and chaos and vandalism. And so there was this effort in the 1800s, a very small group of elite intellectuals in New York, and they called themselves the Knickerbockers, and there were different
Oh,
individuals
yeah,
that were a
yeah.
part of this. They got together and they literally, deliberately rebranded Christmas. And that is where all
Wow.
of our current holiday traditions around the Christmas time come from. And yes, they did cherry pick from old world traditions. So they used inspiration from the old world, which is why there are things that seem to come from old world, pagan cultures. But they were very intentionally cherry picked and then perhaps shifted just a little bit in order to curate a holiday that would be celebrated within the walls of the parlor. So no more mixing and mingling of the classes. The gifts would be given to the children as opposed to the poor, right? And bringing that dreamy romantic Christmas tree, which you're right, Mike, does come from Germany, but they plucked it out of out
Yeah.
of the old world history, and they were very deliberately curating, creating, rebranding Christmas, which again, Christmas used to mean alcohol, gambling, loud street processions in the middle of the night, and these traditions of asking for money and drink and food door to door. So
It was a
So
way of appeasing the serf class back in the Roman times.
yes, they wanted them
And
to feel plugged in romantically to their past, but also we're going to tame this holiday and alter your behavior because we don't like it right now.
and then yeah, don't come through our door. Santa will come through your chimney.
Exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, it's wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty smart on their end. And then of
Yes.
course, yeah, it's gonna reframe a lot of those Christmas carols we sing.
Yes.
And
Yeah, and then Santa Claus, they literally dreamt him up. Like, yes, there was an ancient, uh, Saint Nicholas of Myra, which was
yeah,
ancient Turkey, and then he became the patron saint of the Dutch sailors, and so they kind of popularized it, which is why we think he was a Dutch saint, but he wasn't. He was a from Turkey, ancient Turkey, Myra. And nobody really knows what his deal was. We don't have actual historical records, but there are all these apocryphal myths that that always
didn't
spring up.
supposedly he like come and take kids away? There's like an old
Well,
legend or
okay, there are those legends also. That's
Oh
part of,
boy.
Santa Claus knows when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He
Christmas
knows
is
if you've
starting to
been
get dark here.
been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. There were other characters in the old world that came to play around the time of the winter solstice that were pretty scary. There was a Krampus who would, come
Krampus.
and steal children and take them to the underworld, and if you were bad, right? And then there was even La Perchta. Oh, she was scary. She would slit your belly and like steal all of your insides and your guts and your intestines. And so those again, they were kind of like using some of this old mythology and sort of weaving it into this new holiday they were creating because they said the house of God will not vanquish the house of ale. Like God wasn't working, like even Jesus, like the more wasn't working. So that it was, like darn those pesky pagans, even after the veneer of the Christian overlay, these other traditions were still bubbling to the surface. So they created a new deity, which was Santa Claus. And they sort of refined him, throughout their effort in the 1800s. There was a political cartoonist, Thomas Nast, who also came up with the Republican donkey and elephant, and he really fluffed out the imagery of Santa Claus. But Santa Claus was kind of first introduced by Clement Clarke Moore in his poem "The Night Before Christmas" in 1823, and he originally was a tiny elf with 8 tiny reindeer, right? And then Thomas Nast took that imagery and made it life size and rotund and all the things that we think of. And then in
So
the 30s
where
through
does
the
Saint
50s,
Nicholas where does Saint
yeah.
Nicholas fit into all this?
Well, so Saint Nicholas again, like remember they were cherry picking, so
Hmm.
so sure they used that as inspiration, but then
More
they
from the
changed
Nordic,
it,
yeah.
and they brought
Hmm.
some different elements in, and there was Odin, the Norse god, who had a wild hunt where he rode across the sky on an eight-legged horse during the winter solstice, and maybe that translated, maybe that inspired Clement Clarke Moore to create the 8 tiny reindeer. It's all in there, and then you have to remember that these pagan cultures that all had their individual winter solstice traditions, it was already tangled. They'd already been borrowing from each other and, conquering each other and trading with each other. And so this tradition influenced this culture over here. And so there's no like one direct line of where the inspiration for the creation in the 1800s came from, but it was very purposefully rebranded and created, again, inspired by all this old world mythology, by the Knickerbockers, by this group of New York elites who were largely British. And, Clement Clarke Moore, Washington Irving, John Pintard, who was a very prominent Freemason. And a lot of them are suspected, Masons, or they use a lot of that symbolism and whatnot. And so even if we don't have actual links to whatever lodges they were a part of, there's a lot of suspicion that they were at least influenced by or a part of those societies, and civic groups.
Another psyop. So tell us about
Yeah.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day, yeah. So Valentine's Day, the 13th through the 15th in ancient Rome was celebrated as Lupercalia, which was a fertility rite and a fertility festival. And there were they would sacrifice goats And then very scantily clad young men would cut the goat hide into strips and run around through town whipping women. And it was said that if you were to receive one of these whippings, that it would increase your fertility. So actually, women made themselves readily available for these whippings. And there may have been, other promiscuous activities going on. Some traditions even included lottery systems where you would be randomly paired with a lover or a mate throughout the period of the 3-day festival. So that was the 13th through the 15th. Again, it's early spring, so fertility or rebirth, all these themes are coming to the surface. So Pope Gelasius outlawed Lupercalia in 496, I believe, and 496, and then so often with most of our holidays, we have this multi-layered process that looks like we have originally these pagan traditions that are often rowdy, ruckus, promiscuous, inappropriate, right?
And all,
Behaviors.
but all like connected to a cosmology of astrology and
All
the
connected to,
seasons.
yes, and nature, right? They're all
Yeah.
they're all
Yeah.
witnessing and mirroring back what nature is doing during these different seasons. And so the second overlay would be the Roman Catholic Church attempting to unify everybody under one umbrella, one belief system with Christianity, and that it was very strategic in that they were attempting to allow the pagan populations to maintain some of their rituals, but like giving them a new Christian meaning and veneer. And that's where, again, you're talking about Mithras and Sol Invictus, the invincible sun god being born on the 25th, right? That day when the sun is returning. So we have with Valentine's Day, again, the outlawing of Lupercalia, and then the assigning of Saint Valentine to that day, which, initially Saint Valentine's Day had nothing to do with romance or fertility, very intentionally. And then, again, later, these apocryphal myths were added that, oh, Saint Valentine was a Christian priest, and there was an emperor who outlawed marriage at some point in time because he needed soldiers, and he thought that single men made better soldiers than married men with families and children. And so, so, uh, so this saint secretly, so marriage was outlawed, and the saint secretly married couples when he wasn't supposed to. And then for that, he got thrown in jail, and he fell in love with the jailer's wife, and he wrote her a note saying, from your dear Valentine, or from your Valentine. Well, that all sounds really great and it makes sense, but it was just completely made up in order to make the holiday make sense later on. And nobody actually knows the history of Saint Valentine. He was a pretty obscure random saint. In fact, there were up to 12 Saint Valentines in the Roman Catholic tradition because it was a very common, popular name. And so essentially, what happened was um, in medieval times, Chaucer wrote a poem, and he referenced Saint Valentine, and he was essentially talking about the mating behavior of the birds during that season, which is again spring, so the birds are mating. And he just randomly mentioned on this St. Valentine's Day. And then a couple of other authors took that and ran with it, and it spiraled back into us, treating this day with themes of romance and love and whatnot. But for ages, it was not romantic at all. And then you have the fourth layer of opportunistic commercialism, and actually Valentine's Day is the holiday that kickstarted holiday cards. It all started with Valentine's Day. And
That Chaucer book, by the way, is called The Parliament of Fowls.
there you go.
I
Yes.
learned in my senior AP literature class.
There you go. Yeah. So that's the
Chaucer
one.
is very interesting. He was one of the authors actually and enjoyed his ribald classics and the Canterbury Tales.
Walnut upper with a sure soda, druth the marshes, perthed to the rhoda, and bothed every vine, and swished liqueur, of which engendered to the floor.
Old
Yeah.
Catholic
Sorry.
school, we used to have to get up and recite stuff. Remember that?
Yeah.
I had to
Wow,
learn
that
all
was
that.
okay.
think,
So
yeah.
while we're talking about saints, what's up with Saint Patty? You know, I spent a lot of my childhood wearing a Saint Patrick medallion around my neck to protect me.
Yeah, St. Patrick, that one's not quite as complex as some of the other multi-layered holidays, but St. Patrick, he was actually he was Roman, British Roman, and he was kidnapped by Irish raiders and in Irish servitude for 6 years, and then he escaped, went back to Britain, and later came back as a Christian missionary. Now, again, so much of what we attribute to St. Patrick is made up after the fact, and we do have a couple of texts from him that were written by him, but they say nothing of like driving out the snakes from Ireland. Most scholars believe that the snakes are a metaphor for pagans, that it's driving out the
Right.
paganism from Ireland. But that whole process in Ireland was actually very slow and very gentle and more syncretic, where Irish traditions, pagan traditions, and Christianity really lived in harmony and blended for years and years. And it really wasn't St. Patrick who drove anything out. However, the holiday of St. Patrick's Day really became popularized again in early colonial America because Irish settlers were often marginalized. And so for them, it was about national pride, and they took it and ran with it. And then, the later development again of commercialism and green beer, and even it's said that perhaps St. Patrick taught the idea of the Trinity with the clover, which is nice, but a lot of these things are made up after the fact. Nobody really knows that to be true. It's not written down anywhere historically, and didn't even appear, until much later. So it's very obviously a made up detail after the fact in order to just fluff out and romanticize this whole notion of St. Patrick. But it was really about, these marginalized people just, you know, having some national pride, and so
Leave it to
yeah.
the Irish.
Yeah.
Okay, can we do one more?
Sure.
I'd love to know the true stuff about Thanksgiving, what that's about.
Yeah,
Please
we're
don't tell
coming
me
up
it's
on
not about the
Thanksgiving.
lions
So,
versus the
Well, I
bears.
mean, I think Halloween too. We just finished
oh yeah.
Oh,
Halloween.
Halloween, yeah.
What
Yeah,
should we do first? You guys tell me.
let's just keep
You
going in
you
order,
choose.
maybe.
Halloween first.
Sure.
Okay. So Halloween came largely from Samhain, which is it's the Irish and Scottish pagan tradition, another time when the veil was said to be at its thinnest, and the dead rather, were said to walk amongst the living. And so we have these spirits, all over the place, whether they're benevolent family ancestors and or more mischievous, trouble-causing spirits. And so what developed around that was this tradition of guising or dressing up in costume in order to either appease the spirits or sort of become like one of them so that they wouldn't notice you, to stay out of trouble, to stay out of their way. If you looked like one of them, they wouldn't bother you. So that's where the costumes and the guising came from. Along those same lines, there were traditions of, leaving food out for the spirits and to appease the spirits, right? And so that's the original, right? This Celtic tradition of Samhain. And then the first overlay of the Roman Catholic Church was declaring that time to be All Saints' Day on November 1st, which celebrated the saints who had passed on. All Souls' Day, which then celebrated all the ancestors, everybody who's passed on. And the night before All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day became All Hallows' Eve, or All Hallows Evening, which then got shortened to Halloween, Hallow Evening, right? So, so that was the attempt at Christian overlay. And then, like I said previously, what often happened was these pesky pagans just held on to their traditions, and then often they developed into even more ruckus and rowdy behaviors. And so you have this culture of mischief on Halloween evening or All Hallows Eve, and the tricking piece of it, tricking either tricking the spirits themselves, or there was a culture that grew up around that where it was an opportunity for mischievous young boys to perpetrate mischief and
We used
blame
to
it.
love egging cop cars.
Yes, and blame it on the spirits, right? So that's where that behavior came from. Even when you were young, if you didn't know you were carrying out some pagan tradition, in fact, you were. So what happened was, again, in the 1800s and early 1900s, the mischief piece of it was spiraling out of control. In fact, there was a really funny story about Anoka, Minnesota, in 1919. There, the young people of that town placed a horseless carriage on a schoolhouse roof. They turned over an outhouse that had somebody in it at the time. So it was occupied. They turned over the outhouse and they let out a bunch of cows, and some wandered into the county jail. Another wandered into a classroom and ate some algebra and some history books. And so the townspeople had like had enough, right? And across the states, this feeling of like this is getting out of hand was happening. And so civic groups like the Freemasons, the Oddfellows, and the Elks all got together and began again domesticating, much like Christmas. We need to domesticate this out of hand behavior. They domesticated Halloween. And so the very common tactic was to shift the direction towards the children and the family. Again, this more pious, family-centered thing. So now we're parading around with our cute little toddlers and their cute little costumes, and and then commercialism and industrialism and commercially available costumes sort of helped sweep that along, and the candy companies, of course.
Pacify us with Snicker bars.
Yes, and the candy companies added another layer, but it really started with this effort to again domesticate and quiet down the rowdy masses.
Yeah, this is illustrated in the famous, funny enough, Christmas movie. Well, it's sort of played a lot in Christmas, Meet Me in St. Louis, which takes place in St. Louis right at that time, around 1915, 1919. And there's a famous scene in Halloween and this always really just like confused me. And I watch this every year with my kids, and they love this scene. If you remember, it's the Halloween scene where the little kids go out and they're burning everything in the middle of the street. They're stealing. Like at that point, the neighbors had all put out stuff that they just want to let them destroy. And then they have a bag of flour. And in that bag of flour, they go and they knock on doors. And when the person opens a door, they throw flour in the face of the person. And this was the accepted tradition at this time. So that makes sense that people were getting tired of the youth destroying the neighborhood. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. So Halloween and Christmas especially really share this 4-layer cake pattern of like started with pagan traditions, then the Roman Catholic overlay. Shoot, that didn't really work. The paganism's still bubbling up and through. Now let's domesticate it in the Victorian age. And then, here comes the commercial, opportunistic vultures that are going to swoop in and just accelerate this process and blow it up and out into,
Essentially, it just becomes a Nestle Hershey enterprise.
And then, here we are sleepwalking through these traditions. We don't know where they came from, why we do it the way we do. We don't even know that we've been spoon-fed these curated behaviors, in order to do away with our previous ways of being. And so, again, I feel it's really time for us to all consciously just take a look, a glance, and again rebrand the holidays, but from the bottom up instead of the way that it's been done in the past, which is the top down. Like what is most important? What is most sacred? At Halloween, my daughter and I make an altar. I just posted it, simple one, but we make an altar to all of our ancestors. And it's this beautiful tradition that brings up the topic of death in a container that's not scary. It's not gore. It's not hellish imagery like we have, with our Halloween horror stories and everything. But it's this, talking about our loved ones. And then inevitably I end up telling stories about her ancestors that she otherwise maybe I would never bring up. And it's just this really sweet container where, yes, nature is in a process of decay. Naturally, we begin to think about our own mortality. Well, okay, let's do something at home that speaks to that, but in a way that's healthy and yeah.
And equally as viable, just hanging with each other and making time. Yeah.
And and I'm not trying to be a holiday killjoy. Like I love
this
traditions.
This is fascinating.
But let's add something in that brings back the meaning. you know?
Exactly. So last one, Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah, Thanksgiving. So, Thanksgiving, actually, we can thank one woman, Sarah Josepha Hale, that we have Thanksgiving. And she was,
Great. One of my family members. My dad's side are the Hales, so
really? Oh,
related to Nathan Hale is a extended cousin of mine. I regret to have one life to give to my family. We go to Boston and look at our statues of our ancestors there. So that's
okay.
interesting.
So your family may be partially to thank for Thanksgiving. So so Sarah Joseph Hale was
Responsible.
an intellectual and the editor of Ladies' Goatee Book, which was the most popular magazine at the time in the 1800s, and she just relentlessly and persistently campaigned and lobbied for a national Thanksgiving Day for 17 years. She wrote every single governor, numerous presidents. She petitioned Lincoln 3 times. And for her, it was a religious day, an opportunity and ceremony, and it had nothing to do with the feasting and the, family and the football games and the parades or obviously any of that. It was just a day of religious observance of giving thanks to God, and she really felt that the nation needed a national day of Thanksgiving, and it was President Lincoln who finally accepted her petition and created the very first nationally, you know, I don't know what you call it, but the National Thanksgiving Day. And that was in 1863. And the reason that he did that was that it was a moment, it was during the Civil War, right? Or right after or during. And it was an opportunity or a strategic move to unite the two sides in national pride and create like a feel good, comforting national origin story that would bring the two sides back together. So it was really a political move. So for Sarah Josepha Hale, it was a religious thing. For Abe, it was a political move. And what happened was that, again, originally it was not connected in at all to the story that we tell about Plymouth Rock and the first Thanksgiving in 1621 with Edward Winslow and the Wampanoag natives, and it just had nothing to do with that. So that whole story came from one tiny paragraph that was written in 1621 by Edward Winslow, disappeared for 200 years. I don't know where it went, and then resurfaced in 1820, and then that was used to create this national comforting origin story. So much has been just taken out of context. Yes, there were natives there. It describes in his short little paragraph, but we don't know if they just showed up randomly, if it was a friendly encounter, if there was tension. The buckles on the hats and the shoes are just absolutely, that would never have been a thing because they didn't have money or resources for jewelry at that time, which that would have been considered the single feather. And you think about the pageants in elementary school, right? Like that's not what that tribe, that was not the way they dressed at all. And so it was this curated, again, comforting national origin story that was systematically taught in schools. It was brought into schools in order to create this feeling of unity and national pride. Interestingly, Sarah Joseph Hale's husband was a Freemason, David Hale, and he died of a stroke at age 37. And his lodge then later financially supported some of her book projects and things. So again, there's more to the story than we recognize or realize. I do think Thanksgiving is probably needs the least tweaking to bring back some meaning. I think gathering with family and, theoretically we have home cooked meals, maybe not for everyone, but, I think everybody still at least understands that it's a day to give thanks. And maybe some families even talk about like, what are we grateful for at
Yeah.
the Thanksgiving dinner
Gratitude
table,
day.
you know? So anyway, that's a little bit about Thanksgiving.
That was amazing. Thank you. And as usual, nothing is as it appears, but it's always fun to get the true dope behind things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the end, like you said, it's about finding the sacred in all these holidays. And you know, progressively making them our own again in our own sacred way. We don't need to go back and just like, you know, become a pagan cult or anything.
No.
Like, it's about, yeah, like what you've done with this deck, right? It's bringing it to the modern times and a modern sensibility, but still in very much alignment with the divine and the sacred.
Yeah, and
So
I do think there's also something too. Not that we're again, just like you said, we're not gonna like suddenly go back to, these pagan traditions exactly as they were. But I do think it's important to recognize that all of these traditions originally it came out of observing nature. And and I personally, one of my core underlying beliefs is that more we align with nature, the more we uncover our own highest human potential. So there is something to looking at what nature is doing during each holiday, contemplating that and allowing that to inform how we move through that ritual. In the springtime, there's rebirth happening, what's inspiring us, what inspiration is being born within us. Like I talked about for Halloween, okay, there's nature is decaying. Let's bring this theme of our own mortality in a healthy way. The season of darkness, okay, we're recognizing the light within, we're drawing inward, we're becoming reflective. And, so there is this perhaps opportunity to realign with the wheel of the year, the rhythm of the seasons.
and when you do that, things are pretty intuitive, aren't they?
They sure are. Yeah.
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 So, can you tell us your websites and other places where our good folks can find your marvelous work?
Yeah, so really easy. My name is my website. It's Lara, Lara. Do not sneak a U in there. Even when I spell it for people, they still often sneak the U in. So it's Lara J, my middle initial, Day, Day, larajday.com. You can find links to get the Oracle deck there. You can find my 5 seasonal courses, including the year-long 13 Sacred Nights Guided Experience, which I'll be doing this year. No promises that I'm going to continue doing that moving forward. So if you feel called, hop in this year. And information about doing individual sessions with me, as well as, if you want to reach out, if you have a workshop opportunity, I'm game. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, this has been very informative and a lot of fun. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been wonderful
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you so much, Lara. And I look forward to seeing you in person again. We had a lot of fun at Confluence last year. So,
Yeah, we're going to do it again.
yeah. And maybe Music and Sky have you there too, because
Oh, I hope
that's
so.
going to
Is it happening?
potentially be pretty close to where you live.
Well,
So
but the last thing I heard was that it was on pause for a while. Is it
it
happening
is,
again?
but we're going to try it for 2026. We'll see.
Woohoo!
And it will be in Central California, probably.
Amazing.
So,
Yeah.
well, hey guys, thanks so much for joining us today with Lara. This has been a fantastic show. LaraJday.com. Go support her work. And remember, as always, to get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go show Mother Nature some love. She'll show it right back, no matter what season it is. We love you. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye bye.